this video, I want to focus on a one-time world champion who very easily could have ended up in that category of drivers who were decent in F1 but never won a world championship. I am, of course, talking about Damon Hill. So Damon Hill himself was born into what could only be called F1 royalty. His father, Graham Hill, was two-time F1 world champion, winner of Indy, winner of 24-hour Le Mans. He had his own race team, and on top of that, he was kind of like a, celebrity, British celebrity. Very sort of charming with a little mustache and everything.
Well, I have my moments, but...
So this is the world in which Damon Hill was born into. Now, unfortunately, in 1975, Damon Hill's father, Graham Hill, was killed in an airplane accident. Basically, he owned his own race team and he had his own plane which he flew. While he was flying back from testing in France, he crashed the plane in heavy fog, honestly, not even too far from where he actually lived. And at the time, young Damon Hill, only 15 years old, was watching television with his sister and saw a news flash about a plane crash near where he lived. And he began to worry that it was his father. It was later confirmed. Now, this incident in Damon Hill's life obviously was very traumatic and helped form the person that he would become. For one thing, his father was deemed slightly culpable in the accident, and the family lost all the money and big house that they had. Was basically had to pay it all off in, I guess, lawsuit. So Damon Hill lost a lot of that sort of moneyed privilege that he'd had, and on top of the fact that he lost his father. But, Damon Hill himself says that this kind of was a weird blessing in disguise, and that it taught him who were the real people that he could trust and who were just coming around because they wanted money, basically, Now, initially, Damon Hill was not interested in racing motor cars as his father had done, and apparently his father didn't even want him to become a race car driver. He was interested, however, in racing motorbikes, and he raced the motorbikes all around in England at what they would call the club level, so barely semi-professional. There was some prize money to be won, but it was not a full-time job.
Damon, your famous father, Graham Hill, of course, was a world champion on four wheels. Why are you racing on two?
Well, I've been riding bikes since I was 11, and I just really enjoy riding bikes. Much more exciting than cars, I think, anyway.
So you actually no aspirations to move on to four wheels?
No, not really. I'm very keen on racing bikes. They're very exciting to ride and to watch.
Then he also worked as basically a motorbike delivery guy driving around London and stuff, and he also worked as a laborer on construction sites. So not really living with a silver spoon, and I suppose not really having much interest in racing Formula One cars. Now, a chance meeting that his mother had, a friend of the family went to his mother and said, Damon needs to get himself off those motorbikes because they're so dangerous. Maybe if he likes to go fast, maybe he should try racing, and he should come to this racing school that I run in France.
And I didn't want him to go into Formula One bikes. So I spoke to a friend who runs Wingfield Racing School at Manicourt in France, and I said, do a deal with me. Give him, let him do a course and I'll pay you little by little, which is what we did. Because Damon, he absolutely loved it.
So Damon Hill agreed. Now, I want to put a little caveat at this point, which is that to become a racing driver, basically, many of these guys start quite young. They start in go-karting when they're 8, 10 years old, and they're slowly working their way through the junior formulas. Damon Hill had done none of that. He was basically racing motorbikes for fun, working as a motorbike delivery guy, working as a laborer, and he didn't go to this racing school until he was 23 years old. At that time, and still now, guys that are 23, 24, 25 were knocking on the door, getting into F1 by that time, or even doing okay in F1, first or second season. So Damon Hill was pretty late to the game and had not done all that go-karting and stuff that many of the other drivers had done, some of his other compatriots.
Initially I thought maybe I might have difficulty keeping my neck above water, but now I'm really enjoying it. It's great, and I'm really pleased to be doing it.
Still, he did pretty good at the racing school, and it kind of gave him a little bit boost of a confidence and a little bit of a taste for driving single-seater racing cars. So he decided that maybe he could do this. Did Formula Ford, which of course we know is one of those kind of proving grounds.
Damon Hill is in 4th place. Wearing, of course, the helmet colours that Graham Hill, his famous father, made so familiar.
And he was able to cobble together some sponsorship, so he got himself into British F3, Now, I think a lot of people saw him as like, oh, here comes this son of a famous racing driver trying his hand, you know, let's see, you know, is he a Nepo baby, so to speak. And also at the time, there was a couple of other English drivers that had been in the ascendancy for a while in these junior categories, guys like Mark Blundell and Johnny Herbert, and they were considered to be much more promising prospects, let's say, than Damon Hill ever was considered to be. Still, Damon Hill proved his mettle in the British F3. He won a bunch of races and podiums, and he really proved himself to be a consistent driver. However, his results in Formula 3000 were a bit mixed. He didn't really win a lot of races, or I think maybe he only won one or two. Even with all that, what happened was that his sponsorship money kind of dried up.
The Japanese footwork has come to a halt on the...
However, he still proved that he had grit and determination to stay in there. At the same time, he now had some added pressures in his life. He got married, he bought a house, and his first son had Down syndrome. So this created a lot more pressure, and he needed more money. He really was not living the life that certain more highly touted prospects were living, and certainly not the life of junior drivers in this era where, you know, they're in the Red Bull driving program, they're kind of taken care of, you know, and just allowed to focus on racing, that's it. Still, proving himself to be a capable race car driver kind of left him in a good position in that one of his compatriots, Mark Blundell, had been trying to get a deal as to race for Williams, to be a test driver for them or something like that, but he didn't agree on the deal. So he went to Damon Hill and said, you should go talk to Williams and you should figure out how to get this test drive, because at least it'll get you into F1 and it'll get you some experience, it will get you some money. Still, at the time, test drivers were not really considered to be, you know, a really good path into F1. It was more sometimes seen as a chance, test some cars, still stay in the sport a little bit, earn some money. So Damon Hill ended up getting this job as the Williams test driver. He got some money to at least, you know, live a potentially more stable life. And he was able to, you know, get some real experience in an F1 car.
Looking towards the future, do you think that you're going to have a regular Formula One seat in '93, and do you believe that it'll be a competitive one?
I can't say that. I have to, it's all very much in the lap of the gods. I mean, I'm trying very hard to attract some sort of sponsorship so that I can go along to the best Formula One team and persuade them that I'm what they need.
On top of that, you know, within the team itself were luminaries such as Nigel Mansell and Alain Prost. Now, between 92 and 93, there was a bit of a driver shakeup. Alain Prost came in, Riccardo Patrese left, and Nigel Mansell left. So this actually left a seat open for Damon Hill. And initially, Frank Williams was not that into it. He didn't think that Damon Hill could be a real world champion.
Tous les ingénieurs ici me poussent pour Damon. Nick sûrement a beaucoup de talent, il est très vite, mais les mêmes voix me disent que ne connaît pas beaucoup de la voiture, ne comprend pas beaucoup de la voiture.
But Damon Hill proved himself in the testing, putting up similar lap times to the main drivers, and also his knowledge of the new car, which had a lot of these electronic aids involved in it. And so he had the experience and the know-how to drive this car. He was putting in similar lap times, and I think maybe Williams at the time didn't really have a better option. They saw it as maybe, you know, he's a second driver, if you will, to Alain Prost, because obviously Alain Prost was going to be the star of the team.
We hope he will be a frequent podium visitor, and I think he will make a useful technical contribution to the development of our car with Alain Prost.
As the 93 season started, you know, Damon Hill kind of, you know, in his very first race, he spun off, all right, a little bit of nerves.
Damon Hill. Oh, Damon very well. He spun up, keep it down, Damon, don't stall the engine. I hope he has. Yes, he's done it.
But he sort of said that Frank Williams had kind of been forgiving of him and allowed, you know, little mistakes. He knew that there was going to be some learning curve, right? But as the season went on, Damon Hill proved himself to be a decent racer, you know, was in the hunt, got some podiums, and finally at the Hungarian Grand Prix, he won his first ever Grand Prix, which, you know, is pretty big. because not a lot of people expected him really to be a winner, and I think also, as I've said before, it's extremely hard to win even one Grand Prix, so he at least was on his way to showing he was a, sort of decent, competent driver.
Damon Hill exits the last turn at the Hungarian Grand Prix, and he does indeed see the checkered flag, and Damon Hill, as his great father Graham did before him, wins the Grand Prix. There he is, that's a memorable shot, his first win, and a courtly bow from Damon Hill. Gerhard Berger, third position.
Now, have you caught up with it yet?
Slowly, yes. I mean, it's very, very difficult to suddenly switch on, because I tried to stop myself thinking about winning throughout the race, and so by the time you get to the end, you're still in that mode of thinking, well, don't count your chickens, but you have to then suddenly reverse it all and start to make yourself believe that it's happened, but that's slowly happening.
He followed that up by winning the next two races in Belgium and Italy. So now he was a 3-time race winner in his first ever full Formula One season, and it must also be pointed out that by the time he actually got into an F1 car, he was 32 years old. So pretty long in the tooth to actually get your first ever season in F1. And in that first season, he won 3 Grand Prix and had a certain number of podiums. So this was kind of pretty impressive from a guy that no one really expected much of, had an extremely hard, I guess, life in general, from the age of 15 onwards, and, really didn't follow those proper necessarily channels all the time to becoming a race driver. He really had to kind of make his way. So this is a pretty impressive first season in F1, partnered alongside literally 4-time world champion Alain Prost. Now, of course, as we know, at the end of the season, Prost won the world championship and promptly retired. This left the race team open now for another star driver, and it was known that Senna had been sort of fed up a little bit with McLaren and wanted to switch to Williams, so he was signed to Williams, and previously he couldn't have joined the team because Alain Prost wouldn't allow Senna to be his teammate. Now, if we compare Damon Hill at this time to his compatriots like Johnny Herbert and Mark Blundell, neither of them had as good of 93 seasons. Herbert took much longer to win a Grand Prix. Mark Blundell never won a Grand Prix. And up against these highly talked about English talents, Damon Hill was blowing their doors off. Anyway, so for the 94 season now, we have a sort of Damon Hill and Ayrton Senna. Now, Senna didn't necessarily start the season very well. Part of the problem was the Williams car had initially had a lot of these electronic aids involved in the car, and the next season they were effectively banned. So the car had been designed with these electronic aids in mind, and now it had to drive without them, so it made the car kind of unstable. Senna had some retirements, basically. Damon Hill did get a podium in Brazil in the first race. Of course, as we know, May 1st, 1994 was the San Marino Grand Prix at the Imola circuit, and this, of course, is one of the most tragic moments in all of F1 history, in which Senna was killed at the Tamburello corner. Now, initially when the accident happened, Damon Hill knew that it was bad, but he didn't know that Senna would eventually sort of pass away. He still had the grit or determination to get back in that car, despite the fact that there might have been something mechanically quite wrong with it.
I hope they find out what it was, but I'll do what I'm asked to do. I was asked to drive the car, and I didn't back out of it. I had the option. I could have said, well, wait, what's going on here? Why did he go off? And so forth. You don't do that as a racing driver. You're in race mode, and you just default to race restarts in 10 minutes or whatever, and you go, okay, crack on.
And he put in a competent performance. He got 6th place. Now, of course, after the race, he learned that Senna passed away. This was a huge tragedy for the team. It affected the team massively throughout the season, of course, as it would. And Damon Hill was left to kind of be the leader of the team in a way in which, I'm sure he didn't dream it up this way or want it this way, but that was effectively what happened. And Damon Hill saw his opportunity and put his foot down. And he won 6 Grand Prix in 1994, And this was kind of a really stunning achievement. And at the time, Michael Schumacher at the Benetton team had really been tearing it up. And he was the, sort of heir apparent to Senna, and he was leading the championship all the way until the last race of the season. Basically, Damon Hill, he had to finish above Schumacher and just only win one more point, and he would have been able to win the World Championship, which is pretty crazy coming from being basically the second driver, having your teammate killed in the race car, who was also just one of the most famous people, in F1 in the world maybe even, to now putting your head down and being only 1 point behind Michael Schumacher.
And this is a Grand Prix of which there could be very many firsts. We could see emerge the first German a world champion. We could also see the first father-son world championship. Graham Hill, of course, champion in 62 and 68. Can Damon be the first son of a world champion to, in his own right? That would be, I think, probably the most outstanding achievement of any here this afternoon.
Now, of course, this is a well-documented incident. Damon Hill was chasing down Michael Schumacher in Adelaide. Schumacher at one point went off the circuit and came back on. Now, what Damon Hill didn't know is that Schumacher had damaged his car to the point that he was going to have to retire from the race. Damon Hill saw that Schumacher had gone off and tried to pass him.
The race. Oh, Schumacher in trouble. Schumacher, look at Damon Hill and Schumacher. Oh no! Schumacher and him, and this looks like the World Championship.
This is the end for Schumacher.
Well, let's wait and see. Whatever happens to Damon, he's in trouble as well.
He's in trouble as well.
The front goes on, and the mechanics will get to work replacing that upper wishbone. But the problem is, how much time is Damon Hill going to lose in the pit lane? Where will he rejoin this Grand Prix? Disgust on his head. You can see him shaking it.
Of course, Schumacher crashed Damon Hill out of the race, thus securing Schumacher's first ever world driver title. Now, this was a hugely controversial incident. It was thought that the race marshals and things were going to get involved and were going to disqualify, Michael and give Damon Hill basically the world championship. However, this isn't what happened. The Williams team felt that through all the trauma of the year, they really didn't want to put up a big fight afterwards with the stewards and everybody, to win this world championship on this kind of disqualification. They felt that they had put up a good fight considering the absolute tragedy that had happened to them, and they were willing to kind of draw back, lick their wounds, prepare for the 95 season, and that's basically what they did.
Well, I pushed him very hard all the way. It was a terrific race. It's over now, and that's motor racing. I'm afraid. I just want to say that everyone in the Williams team deserves some sort of medal this year, because we've been through a hell of a tough time, and to be here fighting to win the championship, and the whole team were terrific, and I'd just like to say thanks to all of them this year, and we'll come back next year.
So as the 95 season came along, this was now really seen as Damon Hill's chance to win. He had proved himself the season before by winning 6 races and several podiums and all that. It was no longer seen as like, oh, Damon Hill, we'll see what he can do. It was more like, okay, Schumacher has a genuine title rival in Damon Hill. Now, once again, Michael Schumacher's chicanery comes back, and his mind games, he started to try to get into Damon's head. He did a couple of controversial incidents.
Schumacher on the straight up towards Lake Coombe, but no, he doesn't. Schumacher closed the door on that occasion. Now Damon's on wet weather tyres. The braking capabilities are much, much better on the wets than Schumacher has on the dries. Schumacher tries to go around the side of him. This is side-by-side stuff through Lake Coombe. Schumacher tries to put Damon Hill out onto the curb as they come through. Incredible.
He ran Damon Hill off the circuit in one race. Damon Hill ran him off the circuit in one race.
A little tap. Oh, and Hill hits Schumacher. They both go off.
And the whole season was kind of this explosive sort of fight between Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher, and both guys actually received race bans because of their constant crashing. The point being that Michael Schumacher kind of succeeded in getting into Damon Hill's head. Damon Hill, usually a pretty stoic guy, kind of got a little mouthy in the press conferences and things like that. This kind of didn't suit his style, and it made him distracted from winning the races and keeping your head down, which has kind of always been his strength, really.
Attacks, goes through on the inside. Contact. Now there's going to be a big argument about that. Damon Hill will say, I was close enough to get through on the inside. Schumacher will say, in no way were you.
I've had time to calm down, of course. I thought I saw an opportunity that I could take advantage of, and I'm afraid that Michael is a harder man to pass than that. The championship is still wide open. I think we've shown that we can compete against Michael Schumacher.
Damon,
that's all I want to say. Thank you.
I mean, it's more or less a situation like in Adelaide, where he tried to dive inside where there was no room also. So twice an incident like this where it was absolutely unnecessary, and I can't understand this, to be honest.
The 95 season was kind of seen as, you know, Damon Hill kind of blew it a little bit by letting Schumacher get to him. Still, he was able to win 4 races, get some podiums, but it certainly was not what they had expected out of him. Damon Hill was only ever given 1-year contracts every time he raced in F1. So in the sort of winter time between the 95 and 96 season, Damon Hill reworked his strategy. He found a way to focus himself more, stay away from the distractions, and return to his classic stoic way of being. And this really helped him for the 96 season, which was definitely seen as his last chance to win the World Drivers' title. And, you know, once again, he was only on the 1-year contract, and basically halfway through the 96 season, he found he was not even going to be signed for the 97 season. He was actually dropped from the team, which is kind of another unbelievable, you know, I don't know, obstacle or thing that got in his way. But in 96, he really proved that he was a world champion. He started off by winning the first 3 races of the season to set, obviously, a precedent and take the lead in the driver's title. This was also coupled with the fact that Schumacher himself had moved from the Benetton team to the Ferrari team, which at the time was, they didn't have really the best car, and they brought Schumacher in there to almost kind of bring back the great name of Ferrari. So some people see this as a contributing factor that Michael maybe had a lesser car in 1996, but Schumacher, even with a bad car, is good, and he still won 3 races that year. Hill continued on the 96 season in a decent fashion, although there were some retirements and missed opportunities that really brought it down to the wire.
It's Hill! It's Damon Hill! He's out! I don't know what's happened, but you can see from the way he is holding his head that he's absolutely distraught. Here it is, it's the rettifilio, and he's hit the tyres, and he spins out and stops, and Damon Hill retires on lap 6. That means that Alesi leads, Schumacher is second. Villeneuve, who is Damon Hill's chief challenger in the World Championship, is now in 3rd position, and we're looking back from Hill's car now as he goes into the rettifilio. There's the first pile of tyres. He's hit them, he spins underneath the bridge, stops and out.
Additionally, his driving partner for 96 was Jacques Villeneuve, who himself was the son of a great legendary F1 driver who was tragically killed when Jacques was young. He was trying to make a name for himself in F1 and kind of follow in his father's footsteps the same way that Damon was. Towards the end of the season, Schumacher was kind of seen as less of a competitor to the title, and actually Jacques Villeneuve was nipping at Damon Hill's heels. This came down to the final race of the season, basically the Japanese Grand Prix.
How important was it for you to get pole today?
Well, it's pretty important because it's a very difficult track to overtake on, so if we can have a good start and stay in the front, that's already a good part of the job done.
As the race was going on, Jacques Villeneuve still had a chance actually to win it. However, Jacques had a tire failure and his car crashed out of the race.
And that is Villeneuve, it's Villeneuve! Jacques Villeneuve is out of the race!
And Damon Hill, that basically sealed the title, and supposedly Damon Hill even asked over the radio if he could just come into the pits now and be done. But of course the team wanted him to finish the race, which he did. He brought it home, another victory for himself, for Williams, and of course the world title, becoming the first ever son of an F1 champion to then become an F1 champion himself. sells.
It's the time to say that we are seeing history made because Damon Hill is the son of the great Graham Hill, the world champion of 1962 and 1965, and never before in the history of Formula One Grand Prix racing has the son of a world champion become world champion himself.
So this is absolutely unbelievable kind of story and achievement. In particular, I love the famed Murray Walker's commentary, which he does here at the end of the Japanese Grand Prix as Damon Hill comes in to win.
Damon Hill exits the chicane and wins the Japanese Grand Prix. And I've got to stop because I've got a lump in my throat. Michael Schumacher. Damon Hill, world champion. What about that?
It's just so fantastic. I can't tell you, Murray. I was driving along and I could hear you in my head. I was, there it goes, you know, Jack's out, Murray's off, and you know, it was quite a difficult job to concentrate after I heard that Jack was out. But I wanted to win the race, you know, because I knew that was the best way to finish.
We've all been through the agonies of the damned for the last 5 weeks or so, since Italy, Portugal and now here. We've been worrying, but we hadn't got the prospect of losing the World Championship. Tell us now, how did you really feel?
I was never worried. Never. Don't tell me you were worried, mate. You didn't doubt me, Murray, did you?
I never doubted you for a second.
Oh, blimey, I mean, you're talking about the World Championship. I think... you know, it's an agonising thing. You know, 16 Grand Prix over, what was it, 7 months or something. It's a tough old season, really. But I always knew it was going to be close and go all the way to the end. But you know, I could have finished it off in Monza, and of course I didn't there. And I had to, you know, through my own mistake there, I was, you know, I had to wait even longer.
Now, obviously, him winning the title is an amazing moment and a perfect place almost to end this video and you know, ride off into the sunset. But I think that Damon Hill's career still had a few more elements to it that I found to be very interesting and proof of kind of who this guy is and what made him so great. So after the '96 season and the sort of hoopla of becoming world champion, he took a drive with the Tiny Arrows team, which of course was never going to win a title. Also, by this time, '96, he would have been 35, 36 years old. So really definitely getting long in the tooth, even for back then. Unlikely he would get into a team with a car as good as Williams. I feel like Damon had a really wonderful moment of brilliance, which I'm going to call Damon's Dash. Damon Hill in the '97 Hungarian Grand Prix was able to qualify third on the grid.
You said yesterday you thought you might be able to win this race. You're on the clean side of the track, Jacques on the dirty. Michael's got all sorts of problems with his race car. Things actually looking pretty positive for you.
Well, yes, I mean, when I say, you know, he can win, I mean that the form is that these two guys will go away from me and I'll have difficulty staying ahead of these guys behind me. But motor racing doesn't follow form. All sorts of things happen, and our tyres, I believe our tyres are going to be good for hot conditions. The sun's come out.
And he passed title contenders Michael Schumacher to lead for the majority of the race, basically.
Yes, Damon Hill almost looked as though he nudged the Ferrari. Move over, you can feel him saying in the cockpit, I'm going through, and Damon Hill leads. Oh boy, Damon Hill goes into the lead of the Hungarian Grand Prix.
Only at the very end, a hydraulic problem slowed his car and allowed Jacques Villeneuve to win. Despite having this pretty uncompetitive car, and Damon Hill finished on the podium. And I'd like to also note that in third place was Johnny Herbert in the Sauber, and I think what's interesting about this is that Herbert was one of those guys that was seen to be almost a better prospect than Damon Hill, and here's Hill in an inferior car after having won the world title, finishing ahead of Johnny Herbert. So I think it goes to show, you know, that Damon Hill's work ethic and determination kind of transcended all these other aspects about, you know, who is considered to be an up-and-coming prospect, who has more money behind them, who has more promise, support, everything.
Getting to the point where I thought I could count on, you know, winning the race, but whenever you think things like that, something crops up, and I
hydraulic pump problem, which meant that I couldn't use the throttle started to work intermittently and I couldn't change gear. So that was really, you know, I needed 40 seconds really, not 30 seconds on jet.
Now, Damon Hill was not finished. He left the Arrows team and signed his first ever multi-year F1 contract. He signed a contract with the Eddie Jordan team, and of course, as we know, Eddie Jordan was one of the last kind of privateer teams left, basically a guy without a major corporation behind his team. And over the years, the team had actually had quite a few good drivers come through the team and cut their teeth in F1 at the Jordan team. Now, I must also say that Jordan up until this point had never won a Grand Prix. Hill's teammate, if you will, at Jordan was none other than the younger brother of Michael Schumacher, Ralf Schumacher, who was considered to be a good F1 prospect, and I think, and I could do a separate video on him, achieved decent results in his career, although he never himself won a title. Regardless, he was also the younger prospect, the one that the team probably in some sense would put more behind because he has more of a future and maybe more talent than Damon Hill. I don't know, hard to say. Damon's final magic moment in F1 was in the 1998 Belgian Grand Prix. So the title itself was being fought out between Schumacher and Mika Hakkinen. But on the day of the Belgian Grand Prix, the gods, if you will, intervened. It was a massive downpour, and very early in the race, there was a huge crash.
Position. Bad start by the Ferrari. Great start by Eddie Irvine. Villeneuve. Look at Villeneuve. And into the wall. Who was that?
Coulthard in the wall.
David Coulthard into the wall. Will stop the race.
They'll have to red flag this.
Terrible. Look, this is quite appalling. This is the worst start for a Grand Prix that I have ever seen in the whole of my life.
At the restart, Damon Hill took the lead with a daring move, and shortly after, Mika Hakkinen was eliminated from the race.
Has made an excellent start and leads. Damon Hill gets ahead of everybody at last source. Schumacher going round the outside.
Oh, and Hakkinen spun.
Spinning Hakkinen. Schumacher hit Hakkinen. And Herbert has...
After taking the lead, Hill was later overtaken by Schumacher. Schumacher built up a 30-second lead until it came time to lap David Coulthard.
David Coulthard in these appalling conditions. Oh God! Michael Schumacher hits David Coulthard and is out of the Belgian Grand Prix.
Basically, this allowed the Jordans to inherit the lead with Damon Hill in first and Ralf Schumacher in second. As they went around the circuit, slowly ticking off the laps, it began to look more and more likely that Damon Hill would win the race. And of course, this was a huge dream of Eddie Jordan's, and he had never won a Grand Prix. What was also developing was that Ralf Schumacher was putting in better times than Damon Hill, and in all rights could beat Damon Hill on the track. Ralf Schumacher could win the Grand Prix.
Faster than Damon, so you can catch him. Just push like hell. Push as hard as you can and you can catch Damon. You can catch him and win.
Which, if I'm correct, that this would have been also Ralf Schumacher's first ever victory. So he also had something, kind of stakes in this. But Damon Hill, perhaps using his experience, his knowledge, a little bit of a political acumen, he kind of finessed Eddie Jordan, and basically he got on the team radio back to the pits and sort of said this now infamous series of sentences.
I'm going to put something to you here, and I think you're going to listen to this. If we two race, we could end up with nothing. So it's up to Eddie. You've got to tell Eddie. We can come in. If we don't race each other, we've got an opportunity to get first and second. That's your choice.
And basically what he's saying here is, if we just bring this home, 1-2, we don't race, then you'll have your first ever victory, first ever 1-2 finish in F1 after all the years and time and passion and effort you've been putting into owning and operating this team, Eddie Jordan. Eddie, I think, took this into consideration and understood maybe how rare of a position this was, and he set the team orders that they were not allowed to race and that they were to come home 1-2 with Damon Hill in first and Ralf Schumacher in second. Of course, Ralf Schumacher was not happy about this.
Ralf, you cannot overtake Damon, okay? That is team order. You cannot overtake Damon.
heard me before, didn't you, Ralph, about overtaking Damon? You heard that, didn't you? Get that, Ralph? Did you hear me? Ralph, acknowledge. Yes, Sam.
But that's the way that it goes. Sometimes in F1, you get out-politicked or out-finessed by your older, more experienced world champion teammate. And I thought this was a wonderful piece of Damon Hill's career, and I think a really amazing kind of swan song to the story of his career.
Into the bus stop. He is yards away from the finish, followed by his teammate, Ralph Schumacher. Get ready, it's Britain and Ireland. And Damon Hill wins in Belgium. Fantastic.
And eventually, after the '99 season, he retired. I think, you know, he's a real kind of F1, you know, warrior and a really deserving driver. And I think in a lot of ways, he had a lot of things stacked against him. Even the fact that his father was a sort of F1 celebrity. You know, I think at times this worked against him, and you know what I mean? He didn't really have he lost some of the financial backing, he lost his father, you know, I mean, he didn't, and then, you know, to think that he didn't really get into racing single-seaters until he was older, you know, and basically he won his first world title when he was 36 years old. I mean, it's not so crazy, but you would have thought that, you know, maybe a guy that won it at 36 would have won it a few times before. At every turn, I think his career faced like it could have gone the other way completely, and he could have just ended up a guy that spent a few seasons in F1 and that was it, or never quite made it, or whatever, but he bared down and he won himself a world title, and I think that's really cool and inspiring and interesting. And like I said, I think, I think he deserves his place among the top drivers in the sport.